Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Ludic Shills, Nestle, Search, Peasants, Vassals. I'm a useful idiot, and I want to welcome the first new war of 2013, and that is the war in Mali. And I did a video probably 2 or 3 months ago talking about an upcoming war, UN war in Mali, in Africa. And the timetable is really moving along quickly. And we reached a turning point last week when the UN created a resolution that was unanimous in calling for a military intervention in Mali. So here we go again. So we see the same blueprint used over and over again in different countries. And this is not unlike what we saw in Libya, albeit tailored to the specific needs of Mali. So as lined out in my previous video, they're going to have a multi-African force made up of troops from the Western African Union. And it will be a force of about 10,000, including the Mali army. And they will be doing the brunt of the fighting. And the U.S. and France and NATO will just be lending support. Well, as it turns out, the support that's coming out is fairly substantial. So one can easily consider it yet another war for the United Nations. And we have both the Pentagon and the State Department assisting in Mali. So that means we'll also have a lot of mercenaries, but we won't hear about them. There's going to be, if the State Department's involved, that means we have private contractors operating on the ground in Mali. And these troops will be involved in training, equipping, and transporting the Mali troops. So we have the African army will be the cannon fodder, and then the U.S., France, and NATO will be supplying all sorts of other kinds of support. And in fact, a Defense Department spokesman suggested that warplanes would assist. So we also know that there's also 400 French Special Forces troops in Mali. So there are Western forces boots on the ground that will be participating in the fighting. And we also know there's U.S. Special Forces on the ground, and we also know that there are other UN NATO nations in Mali. So this is definitely a unified NATO effort. And we see a lot of the other same things that we see in these sort of scenarios. For example, they say the justification for going there is it's the largest territory controlled by Islamic extremism in the world. So these links are created to Al-Qaeda, where they don't necessarily exist. The fact is that it's an Islamist break-off secessionist regime in North Mali, but other than that, we don't really know if they have any connections whatsoever with Al-Qaeda. But once you label them as Al-Qaeda, of course, they become terrorists, and they come under a whole new heading of laws, certainly here in the United States and internationally. So they're economically cut off right now, and but it's almost too late, because one of the things that's interesting, of course, is that the secessionist movement and the Islamists in northern Mali got all their weapons from Libya. So all their weapons are from the very NATO sources, Britain, France, the U.S., the supplied weapons to Libya are now the arms that the Islamic insurgency movement has in Mali. So interesting turn of events there. But so we have this UN resolution. It's been an interesting sequence of events in Mali as well, because we had a dictatorship in power that the U.S. supported, and then the Islamists were creating a secessionist movement and insurgency in Mali, and they didn't deal with it effectively enough, and the military had a coup, and now the U.S. supports that very same military coup government that runs Mali. And I find this whole situation interesting in a lot of ways, particularly once again in the geopolitical and historical realm, because Mali, much like what we're seeing play out in the Middle East, they're part of the post-colonial world, and they only received their independence in 1961. And they also have problems like we do in the Middle East, where colonial borders ignored tribal lands, and so Mali, just like we find in the Middle East, has a situation where they have a tribal territory of the Tuareg tribes that also overlaps in 3 other African countries in that region. So much like Kurdistan that borders 4 countries, we have this Tuareg country that overlaps 4 different African nations in this post-colonial world. So these tribal rivalries and ethnic rivalries are playing themselves out again. But now we have, of course, a Western intervention that makes these things all the more complicated. And we have this complication, of course, because the U.S. wants to counter Chinese influence in Africa, and that includes Mali. And Mali, once again, is rich in gold, oil, and agriculture. And so Western corporate interests are very interested in going in there and exploiting virtually untapped cornucopia of agricultural gold and oil. So that's the real story, and that'll be the real story across Africa as the U.S. and AFRICOM operates in all these countries. But anyway, get ready for this this new U.S.-NATO war in Mali, and I recommend going back to a couple of videos I did that didn't get that many views at the time. One is on fragmentation, and that's this whole discussion about post-colonial borders having to redress themselves, and we find that situation in Mali as well as in the Middle East. And the other video is a video I did called Pentagonism. It talks about how we have more and more situations developing like we do in Mali, where the United States ground forces will not be the boots on the ground. We will train, equip, and support native armies. So that way we make a lot of money that way, supporting and creating and arming these native armies, but we don't take the risks and pitfalls of actually putting our own boots on the ground. So anyway, here we go. Interesting situation. The U.S. resolution is passed unanimously. We have another UN war, another U.S. war, another intervention coming up in Mali in Africa. And this is a blueprint we've seen before, and we will see it again. I'm Useful Idiot. Don't you be one too.